It's a no.
Okay. All right, before I sit down, there are a lot of landowners here that, from Green Gables and surrounding area, and I would like for them to stand up and introduce themselves, just so you know who they are. Would all of you guys stand up, please, and introduce yourselves?
I'll go. Chaz Baker, 806 North Allen. How's it going? Just moved here 3 years ago. Love it here. Thank you.
Ali Patton, 849 North Hickman.
Lindsay Ingebrigtsen, 961 North Hickman.
Mary Green.
Linda Johnson, 808 North Allen.
Stan Fowler, 802 North Allen.
Bonnie Krieger, 812 North Allen.
Jack Krieger, 812 North Allen.
Sandy Harlan, 201 West Green Gables.
Dale Besworth, 216 West Green Gables.
All right, thank you. There's a couple other people, I believe, that have a couple of short comments. Go ahead.
Mine's short. Linda Johnson, 808 North Allen. I went around to all the neighbors in the neighborhood and showed everybody a copy of the plat. And over again, I kept hearing the same two comments or questions. The number one question that was asked is, why does Darren think everyone will go down Hickman Street? Starting at Fairgrounds, the street is nothing but a bunch of potholes and is narrow. Allen Street is a nice paved street that they can travel on. Although the plat shows Hickman is the entrance, but using just a little bit of common sense, in reality, Allen Street is actually the entrance and exit. As we know from previous discussions, International Fire Code is not being met. The second question that was asked over and over, what does Darren have planned for the other 11 acres? More than likely, another subdivision. That subdivision would also travel down Allen Street, which more than likely, everybody in that subdivision would go down Allen Street.
Thank you.
My name is Stan Fowler. I live at 802 North Allen. I also will go along with the statement that she made, what's going to happen to the rest of that property that he has not showed on his plat that he's going to develop. Also, Allen Street, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, you ran a test on Allen Street to determine how many cars ran up and down that street. And I've never heard the results on the numbers there, but I would say it was quite a few. And I too do not believe that people will be using Hickman Street instead of Allen Street. A couple other things I have. One, if it's true that the last surveyor was told and that he was not going to get paid unless he made some corrections to benefit him rather than being correct according to the regulations of the city. If that is true, then how are we ever going to believe anything that is submitted with regard to this plot? Another thing is I think that the city has an ordinance about grass being so tall. I think if the rest of us people, if we had grass that was 18 inches high, we would be given a warning to cut it down. And that piece of property out there right now has grass on it that's knee high.
Yeah, my name is Jay Gephardt. I'm a civil engineer and a land surveyor. I own a company called Civil Group. Thank you all, and thank you guys for your comments. When Don was speaking, he made it sound like we were doing something incorrect, and I, professionally disagree with that. I feel like there's this misunderstanding that Hickman as primary access, it has to be the primary access for it to meet the fire code. But if you read the fire code, it requires an all-weather road. It doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be anything like that. And we do this quite often in Columbia, where we have developments that have a fire access that's actually gated and has Knox box on it and not used. And the other entrance becomes the thing, but the idea is that that access road is in place, so if there's a major catastrophe or major evacuation that needs to occur, that can be opened up and that can be done. Or if there was an accident on Allen Street that prevented people from getting in and out, tree goes across the road, whatever it might be. So, I just want to point that out. I don't feel like I've done anything that's in violation of the fire code on this. We're showing a large lot, and it's strange to me that on a sketch plat especially, that we're not doing a plan for the whole property and then restricting it to the number of lots that would be allowed with the access that's present today. And the rest of those would have to just sit and hold until another access happens, or that land next door develops or something where another street is provided. But we're not doing that here. What we're doing is we're showing one big lot, and we've got 28 lots total because there's 2 existing homes on Hickman. And we're showing that large lot as, and I'm going to call it a holding lot or whatever, but it's just going to sit there until another access is provided that meets the fire code. And I can promise you that's the intent on this, is to do the 27 lots and then hold until some of the property on either side of us develops to provide another access. As far as the cul-de-sac link, this isn't a cul-de-sac. This is a temporary turnaround. The intent is for the street to extend to the north and provide access to property. I think it's good engineering practice to have roads extend to the property lines so that access, and we have a continuity of street network as pieces develop. So that's the intent here, is we're going to stop the street there, we're going to put a temporary turnaround in, but eventually the street would extend on and be connected to the north or to the west, or in some fashion to be extended. I understand, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I understand how personal this can be for people. It's just, affecting their home, and it's the most valuable thing they own. And I do understand that, and I try not to do anything that would cause a problem with that. And toward that end, I've talked to Darren, and the portion of Hickman Street that's butts us right there, he's willing to improve that as part of his plans to provide that. It doesn't seem necessary or correct that he would have to extend that all the way down to Fairgrounds and improve a section of what's clearly already a city street on that. But as far as the connection to Allen, again, I think that's just good practice to have that connection. We don't have to have it, right? We've got our access off of Hickman. We could have shown not connecting it to it, but that's why that street was stubbed. That's why it's there where it is so that it could be extended and used. And that's, if it was meant to be a dead-end street or an end street, it would have been cul-de-sac, and that's not. So, do you guys have any questions? I do better when you guys ask questions than when I just ramble on. But, anything in particular that has you concerned, or?
Could you clarify what you just said about improving Hickman what he might be willing to do there, where, how far he would go.
The part that's in front of his property up to the entrance, so, right now, I just show it stepping out to the existing road, but this section here from Darren's south line, he would improve. So we're building that portion of the street that's there. This portion, that's like what I was talking about, is already a city street, and it doesn't seem right to have one developer improve that one. It benefits a lot more people than just him. So, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I find it strange that there's even a discussion about the professional part of this. It's the first time I've ever had that brought up to me, and I don't know quite what to think of it, but I can tell you that I am trying to follow the city code, the fire code, and do what is allowed to be done, and do it in a manner that has a small impact, try to mitigate those impacts to the neighbors. And that was my intent when I started working for Darren on this, is to just figure out a way to meet all the code and provide a plat that could be approved. And again, we're in the very beginning stages of this process. It's a sketch plat. We still have to do a preliminary plat and then the final plat. So I just feel like, and conceptually, I think this is a very sound layout. So.
Are you looking at having all the street drainage go to the north?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, there'll be a detention pond built up there.
Yeah, I seen that. I wasn't sure on that east-west street there on the
Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask him questions too?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we've been through this several times with the International Fire Code, and actually the second entrance is up by Engelbrittson's house. So can you understand why, can you explain why we should not follow the International Fire Code?
We are. We have, from Fairgrounds up, there's,
No, from the two, from Allen Street and Hickman Street, the remoteness is not there.
right, so I don't need two entrances. So you don't have to meet the remote entrance part because there isn't two entrances required. Only one is required because we have the 30 lots.
Okay,
So what your point is if I was counting Allen Street and it was both access and trying to do more than 30 lots, no, I don't meet the remote distance that's defined in that. But because we're doing 30 lots only and the access is from Hickman, that is how that works. So the remote part doesn't apply because there isn't a second access.
okay, then can you explain to me how all the cars are gonna stay off of Allen Street?
I'm not saying that they are. And let's not confuse primary access with fire access. They're two different animals. And I fully suspect most people will, and I say most, probably everyone, will probably go down Allen Street. But the idea is that if there is an emergency or an accident or some reason for the fire to activate, they could open up that area and there is a second way for people to get in and out. And that's the purpose of the fire access.
Okay, so you agree then too, everybody's gonna go down Allen Street?
I'm not gonna argue with you about that, no.
Okay.
No. Yes, sir.
Hi, I just had a question to dovetail off of that. You mentioned the fire access, and I saw a lot of scrunched up faces when you mentioned sometimes you'll gate off a fire road for, it's not always access. A lot of us here probably thought it sounded like you plan on gating Hickman Street with a lock on it. In case there is an emergency, then we could open up and allow access. Is that what you guys plan on doing?
No, I'm just saying.
Could you I guess restate that so I'm not as confused? You had mentioned Hickman being a fire access road, and you would use your examples in Columbia, and what you use is a road, and we'll gate it off with a lock on it if there is an emergency. Then you unlock it and let people through there. And it sounded like that's what you guys had planned on doing.
No, it's not what we plan on doing. We plan on building that section of Hickman Street up to our entrance and having that open to be there. And my point was probably poorly stated, but what I'm trying to say is that the only access that's required is Hickman. The Allen Street one's a bonus that's there, and it's because of the way it was stubbed. So that's how we're doing this, trying to make that happen. So, no, we will not gate Hickman. It's a public street. I don't think we could gate it if we wanted to.
Right, I think that's why we were confused. Thank you.
Now, did you say the cul-de-sac was a temporary deal?
Yes.
Until you got another street coming in from some other area?
Yes.
That may be 10, 20, 40, 50 years. You never know how long that's good. So that's gonna make
It
that
could be 2 years.
not likely, okay? All right, but it could be a long, long time also.
Yeah.
So you've got a temporary basis there, you have absolutely no idea how long it's gonna be.
Well, what's your vision of a temporary turnaround? Because what are you envisioning for that temporary turnaround? Because what I see is a rock base covered with asphalt, and it's an asphalt street, so that it can be removed in the future and the street extended. That's what I envision for that. So if it were to go 50 years, it's still a hard surface, it's still maintainable. The cities can plow the snow, they can take care of the street and do whatever they need to.
Did you say asphalt street?
No, just the temporary turnaround
Oh, okay.
part of it would be
Just checking.
capped with asphalt.
Is that gonna meet city code?
They can do the asphalt on that. That is purpose, that's where it could cut it away.
Okay.
Now, I think you mentioned that the plan right now is not the final plan, is that correct?
The plan today is all that we are proposing to do.
As of right now?
But yes,
What's
no doubt.
the future for the rest of it?
Probably something similar to that once we have another access point. But until we have that access point 50 years from now, we can't do anything. So, the original sketch plat showed a lot more lots, and it showed what the potential development of that could be. In my mind, the way it should have been handled is said, okay, we'll approve this with the condition that you can only final plat 30 lots off the excess, and the rest of it is just planned for that, so everyone would know what the ultimate plan for that is. But that was rejected, so we came back with this, well, we're just gonna do what it literally says, is you can do 30 lots. So we've done it, we're showing 30 lots. But I'm telling you, that large lot won't be for one single family home. It will be sitting there, maybe Darren's kids will develop it someday. But it will sit there undeveloped until such time another access is brought to the property.
Did you say that you were not the original surveyor on
I
this?
am not.
What happened to the other one?
He failed to get the sketch plat approved.
Why?
You were here, I wasn't, I don't know. So, and
I can answer that. He failed to show up at any of the meetings as our contract agreed to. And for whatever Don said, I can tell you that's a bold-faced lie, so. If that answers any of your questions.
Can I have one more question?
yeah.
So the one that shows that house 28,
Mhm.
okay, that will never be developed?
No, I
Until there's
didn't- I
another,
didn't-
no,
I
no,
didn't say
until
that.
there's another entrance.
Until there's another entrance.
That could be 10 years, it could be never.
Yeah.
Or if the fire code changes.
Well, correct,
Yes.
yes. Oh, yeah.
But and just to be clear though, that when this lot is laid out so that there could be another street here with homes on both sides.
But at that time, it would have to come second remote
Right.
access.
Right, and that access could come through
You could not
any
go
of these
any further.
properties over here, but it could not occur today.
We would allow it. Go ahead.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
respectfully, who's taking responsibility for bringing Hickman up to code for this? Is that the developer or the city of Centralia or some other area?
The developer is taking responsibility from his south property line to just north of his entrance. And the rest of it, it's a city street, just like all city streets.
Thank you, sir.
So the city would be responsibility from the highway to the bottom of Mr. Bedsworth's property there.
They are responsible for all city streets. So, and there's a lot of city streets in Centralia that aren't to the new standards. This portion, what we would do is get a jump start and get that part built. Yeah.
We had an auction Saturday, we could go Saturday, or I think it was we could go Saturday, maybe it was this past Saturday.
The third.
Yeah, there was major traffic on Allen Street with those pickup trucks parked along the side. It is very, very difficult to get through Allen Street from Green Gables to the highway.
Right. I understand that.
Make it a lot easier having Hickman open.
So it's open, yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
So if the portion of Hickman Street would be brought up to the city code, how wide would it need to be?
It's a collector street, so whatever the standard is for a collector street.
Wouldn't you need an easement to make it wide enough from the neighboring property?
38 feet.
They're 38 feet and a 60-foot right of way.
Yep.
So how would you make that 60 feet with an easement that is not big enough right now? Because there's no easement right now on the neighboring property.
We are dedicating our 30 feet, that, it shows 25, so that would have to be corrected. Because I thought it was 50 feet, but there's a question, and it's a legal question, on whether, how far Hickman is the public street. And I'm not gonna wade into that because that's not my bailiwick. But my understanding is from the attorneys is that that is a public street. And so when that property on the other side would develop, then they would dedicate the right-of-way, the remaining right-of-way for that. And just so that everybody, I mean, I'm not trying to hide anything. We're showing Hickman Street going all the way to the north property line. We're dedicating half the right-of-way for it all the way up, with the idea that that would be a street that's continued, and it may be 50 years or however long it takes, but at least it's being planned for, and the right-of-ways would be dedicated so that it could be built in the future, that collector street.
So you're gonna dedicate the right of way for that all the way up?
Yeah, that's what
Then,
it shows.
according to the city standards, I think you would be required to build that half street all the way up.
How do you build half street, Doug?
It's difficult.
We've done it.
You know, the only other way to do it would be to move the street over onto us and get it off that, and if that's what we need to do, then we can do that.
All right.
Thank you for your time, and again, I'm here if you have any questions. Appreciate it.
I would like to make a couple comments. Yeah, I'll be short.
All right, 1 minute.
First of all, I've known Jay for many years. I am not trying to throw him under the bus on this. I understand the situation he's in. The cul-de-sac requirement doesn't specify that it's only for permanent cul-de-sacs. It's a requirement for cul-de-sacs, period. So 800 feet is the maximum. As far as putting Allen Street and Hickman Street, showing both of those on there, the primary access is Allen Street. 18 lots is what he should be limited to, because that's the primary access. It's just not a good idea to say that we have access over there so we can put more lots in. That's not what the code says. The code says if you don't meet that remote requirement, then you're going to be stuck with where it is. You would go with the minimum of those. That would be 18 versus the 28 that they have now.
Thank you. Okay.
since we're talking common sense, Darren Adams, 814 Lockport Drive. Since we're talking common sense will tell everybody that if you drive down Allen Street one time and there's cars parked on the side of the road and you can only go 20 miles an hour there, or you could take Hickman and pop right out on 151 and hit the overpass to go to work in Columbia faster, that's gonna be your point of traffic. Do I think people are gonna use Allen Street? Yes. They'll probably use it significantly more at the beginning, but at the very end, Hickman Street will be used dramatically more than what Allen Street is.
There's no guarantee of that.
Plus all the potholes.
But say, they need to get insurance on their car.
And there is a question, about whether Hickman Street is actually a public street at this time. That is not a settled issue. But I can tell you that the right-of-way there of 60 feet is not there at Green Gables, and on the other side, North Star subdivision took right-of-way from that, so there's considerably less than 60 feet of right-of-way there.
Okay. Thank you. Back to where we are. All right, so thank you all very much. We're going to do the public hearing portion now for the actual first one, which is the rezoning request for the 2 tracts of land for Clinton and Gray Dubes. We'll come back. Yes. So it's open for any comments for that. No comments? All right. That was it to you, right? Okay. I'm gonna close the public hearing portion of the meeting. Thank you all very much. I'm gonna bring it back to the board now for questions and comments regarding the 2 subjects. If we could start with the rezoning request for Clinton and Gray Dubes first. Any questions or concerns there? All right, and in light of that, we have.
We can make a recommendation.
No, I can do that one first. And then we'll do it together.
But there are 2 tracts of land, so you need 2 separate
Both of them?
motions. 2 separate motions.
All right, so we have a motion on the first tract of land for the rezoning request for Dubes. All those in favor on the first tract of land? Aye. Opposed? All right,
The way this is worded in the action agenda, it gives you options, so I think we gotta specify we're recommending M1 industrial.
You want my motion to favor?
Yeah, modify it to M1.
you good. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You all get the technical on that. We'll go back to my gavel. R1, thank you. And all those, so do we have a motion on the second track of zoning for R1?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No,
Oppo-
should be our item, M1 also, both of them should be
M1?
probably. There'll come a time when they're using that for office or something else, or the business adjacent. But they're just kind of common unit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any issue with that?
I don't have an issue with that, and however it should be, I mean, eventually, yes, we would like to have an office in there.
So we're gonna change that to M1. We can modify the motion to M1 on the second track of land, please. Any motions for that?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. That one's settled. On to the sketch plat for the North Point subdivision by Darren Adams. We have Sydney on the phone. So, here's a reminder, I don't know if she has anything to say right now, but.
No, but I'm here for questions if anyone has them.
Okay. And questions from the committee? I have the first one here somewhere. We're gonna add the names of the adjacent landowners to the sketch plot.
Yes.
Thank you.
You Sydney? You Sydney?
Yes.
Chris Cox. My biggest question at this point is Hickman Street and your thoughts on where the street runs to, and your thought on, easements need to be, gotten.
So from reading everything that I've received from the County Road Commission, which I'm going to be very candid with you, they did not have the most excellent record on Hickman. In my conversations with them, it was intended that it would run all the way from the highway straight north. What I can legally be confident of is that at least there is a right-of-way easement that the city possesses running from the highway to at least the southern entrance of where Darren is planning to put the subdivision at entrance point. I believe it becomes a little more unclear there north. Candidly, I think if the city needed a sound decision on that, normally I would shift that to the developer, as they may have a responsibility to acquire certain rights of way if they're gonna build it, but it would need to be a formal survey done to determine the exact right of way north of that southern entrance point. I mean, at this point, from the records I've seen, that is what I can be confident of.
Thank you.
So how difficult would it be to acquire, to run Hickman all the way up to the north end of the proposed subdivision, terminated there until the next phase is suddenly built to the further on north or further, west of that subdivision? How difficult would it be just to continue the road up to there, cut it off, and giving Darren Adams his second entrance off the west versus having to wait for who knows how long it would take?
I'm not for sure if I completely understand the question. Like I said, I'm confident that there is sufficient right of way that is possessed by the city to get to the southern point on Hickman of where Darren's proposed subdivision will begin. How difficult is it to acquire further right of way? It just depends on, approaching landowners. So if landowners would voluntarily provide a right of way so that it is clear in the record, that is something that the city and or the developer or jointly can propose and then attempt to purchase right of way moving north. Has that answered your question?
Kind of, but I was just kind of curious if the city is supposed to have Hickman Road and going further north, shouldn't the right-of-way have already been in place for future road expansion in that area?
Per the comprehensive plan, Hickman is supposed to be a collector street, and from some of the documents that have been reviewed, there appears to be right of way even farther north of that southern point of Darren's subdivision. But I have not seen a formal plat documenting that road farther north than that. Don Gorman has already done an incredible job of gathering a lot of the information there. If the city needs sound guidance on exactly how far north it goes, it would have to, again, retain a private surveying firm to make a determination of exactly where that right of way is. and that can be, it can be costly, which is why I propose, since this is for a development, that it be jointly borne between the city and the developer, or potentially on the developer himself.
Okay.
You're talking about establishing that boundary line, correct?
Yeah, just to make sure, because I know there's been some discussion, we've got a 50-foot easement to that southern point of the subdivision that I believe I'm legally confident that exists. The question is how much of a right-of-way north of that point does the city have and was originally platted out? Was it 50 feet? Was it something less than 50 feet? I do not believe I have seen a document that clearly defines how much right-of-way exists north of that southern point, if I'm making sense.
Is that question
What I'm
here?
understanding.
This we're confident of from
Only-
here to here?
No, from here to Highway 22.
We're confident from
Or
here to
yeah.
here is questionable still.
All the way there is questionable.
So we basically have everything.
It's
Get that survey done for the rest of us.
Mr. Pat's property, correct?
I agree.
But yes,
Thank
there
you.
was
I
something
think-
would need to be done.
Yeah, I think we need to look at it. Which is even what's the 52nd access point.
So this,
So this one.
So,
they don't necessarily develop a plan.
so would it be fair to say, Sydney,
From the land across the subdivision.
for us to move forward, that's gotta be determined to know what we can do moving forward and what it would take. I mean, as far as getting clarification of what was planted and factual.
Correct. I mean, in order for, not necessarily, I mean, but for the finalization of, not at this stage right now, the sketch plat stage, but definitely by the preliminary plat stage, the developer should provide proof to the city of where the rights of way exists, how big the rights of way are, and if additional right of way is needed. That is a burden that the developer has to show to the city. Right now, from what I have seen, largely provided by other documents, not directly by the developer, are, as I've described, the 50-foot right-of-way leading to the southern access point along Hickman. So in order for the developer to meet the requirements of our codes and ordinances, he would have to provide proof to the city of where all the right-of-way lies for all of the roads he intends to build out, utilize, and/or need in order to meet other requirements in the code and ordinance.
And some of that would come with future development if this first phase went in as with one point of entrance access. You'd have to have two in the future to develop it further. And so I guess the question I'm asking is then, the sketch plat could be, it's a sketch plat. So it's not the preliminary plat. So for face value, it could potentially be approved with contingencies that have to be met before it could become a preliminary plat. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, correct. And according to the statute, I mean, I would like to just read this very briefly so that everyone understands what a sketch plat is, because a lot of the questions are excellent questions and will need to be captured in the preliminary plat in order for the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve it. But the purpose of a sketch plat is to provide the subdivider an opportunity to consult early and informally with the Planning and Zoning Commission before preparation of a preliminary and/or recorded plat before submission of a formal application to the commission. The intent of this procedure is to assist the subdivider in preparing a plat which will meet the requirements of the comprehensive plan, the requirements of the commission and/or other public agencies, as well as to identify the improvements and uses of the subdivision and other potential problems involved in the proposed subdivision. The provisions for a sketch plat are intended to decrease the cost for the developer and to eliminate inadequate design elements in the early stages of a subdivision process. So, just to reinforce to the Planning and Zoning Commission, you all can approve the sketch plat even though it does not meet every element of our ordinances and code. However, you can condition the approval on certain things that the city knows now are missing from this current sketch plat, and condition that by the next time he brings the preliminary plat, which would be the next stage, he must meet all of these requirements, and if he fails to address and meet those requirements, that the plat will simply be denied on its face before even coming before Planning and Zoning Commission. So, have I answered your question, Mayor?
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask one question to her. Last week when you had the conversation with my two attorneys and everything, we were under the impression that everybody was on agreement that the city right of way actually went to the southern line of Mr. Engelbrettson's driveway, where the city annexed in that 90 by 180 foot lot to make the new city limits. Is that correct?
I can sort of hear you. What I agreed when I spoke with the attorneys for Mr. Adams is we agreed in our conversation that to the southern point of where Darren had mapped out the entrance point along Hickman, we were confident that the city owns that right-of-way interest. But the farther north you get, it becomes questionable about how much right-of-way was acquired. A question arose in our conversation about, was it 50 feet? Is there 25 feet? That would need to be clarified, and I do not believe neither myself nor Mr. Adams' attorneys had possession of anything that would at least give us confidence as attorneys to apply about the actual legal ownership and the dimensions of that ownership at this time.
These are conditions that and this one shows it on the hash street, even on the hash street. That was street, yeah. That's not interesting already.
Susan? Can I make a comment? There is a reason why we're here at the sketch plat state rather than preliminary plat state, where some of this would probably get worked out. This is a public hearing. There is no public hearing at the preliminary and final plat stage. So they don't have the right to speak there. The other thing I'd like to point out is, right after this, there's a motion to, or there's a vacation request before you that concerns this very thing. I think that ought to be discussed also.
So Darren, I got a question for you. How come you didn't put one of them temporary cul-de-sacs at the end of the street that comes off Hickman that goes straight over to Allen? Why did you go ahead and connect them? Why did you put a temporary cul-de-sac there?
This is not servicing any houses.
Typically, you put in a temporary
Same reason
turnaround.
now that Southwest, it doesn't have any.
Temporary turnarounds are usually put in the county. They say at one lot depth. In the city of Columbia, it's 200 feet. But in other words, there's a turnaround right there in that intersection, a T-shaped turnaround. And that is considered to be sufficient for that. But if you guys would like to have a temporary turnaround put there, we can. It's just belts and suspenders.
I mean, if you did that, that would eliminate them going down Allen Street. If you didn't connect that yet, so it was final.
That would
Then
solve
they
the
would
problem.
have to use Hickman Street.
Well, what about moving, I don't know about Mr. Adams' feeling, why not move, yeah, they may have to do a little resketching, but why not put a house across there, permanently blocking that? Could, would that serve?
I mean, it's the same thing, I believe, I'm pretty sure Don designed Southwest Country Estates, and you guys got feeder streets going, where we did cobblestone, Lynn, up on the final plat of the third phase, wanted us to kill a lot to put a feeder street in. So you guys typically want feeder streets?
That eliminates a lot of concern, though, what you're talking about there, as far as the traffic flow.
We're still gonna connect to Allen Street though.
Sure. I don't have any other
What
questions.
the, you address the half street? Here. We have a platted half street. Is that the one that's right? Was it in?
Yeah, it's on the west side.
This, that's the east, that's the east, right?
Yeah.
Right here. We can't accept new half streets, so
It would have to be a condition to fix that.
to fix it.
It would be a condition noted in the preliminary plat that would come up, right? She's gonna have to tell
Well,
me.
you would wanna note it now,
Yeah,
so
note it now,
that they
going
have
forward,
to
yeah.
fix it.
What all would need to be addressed in the preliminary plat.
Mine, will you give company comments?
You're in, so maybe he has nothing to say.
Having all those lots to be double facing lots is a little bit of a pain, but we do have a plan that says Hickman should be a collector. And so that should be at least 30 feet dedicated from Darren and he needs to get the adjacent property owner to do the other 30 feet and participate in construction or put up the money when he does a preliminary plat. Because to get a final plat, you either have to have all the improvements in place, or you have to have financial guarantees that those will be built. And then the issue of whether it's built 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now is just a different sort of issue. It's the money in the bank to pay for it, just like they did with Southwest Country Estates. I think that probably, if the county shows straight there, whatever it's supposed to have been, that needs to be determined before you can make a recommendation on how to address that. Darren may be not having to dedicate anything because there's something already there. It's still his responsibility to pay for half of it in that case. But he could avoid worrying about the dedication from the adjacent people towards a great number of the improvements.
It was a plan to be a collector street because it was a plan to be zoned M1 as
No.
well.
No. It's just, you need so many wider streets to serve certain amount of acreages. I'm not sure there's a rule of thumb, but certainly 20 acres is enough that it needs to be more than just a local residential street. I would also make a recommendation that Darren's engineer indicates he's willing to pay down to what would be basically the north line of Green Gables extension. My recommendation is when all this is said and done and we know what we have, that the developer will be responsible for the construction of Hickman Street all the way to Fairgrounds Road. And that's not within the limits of his property being subdivided, but it is a necessary improvement. And he's already agreed by his submission here that he's gonna have to extend sewer. The city has the right to request or require off-site improvements to serve the subdivision. And that certainly will not ameliorate totally the concerns of the audience, but having it as a full-blown street as far as fairgrounds goes a long way towards making it easier for some of the people in the subdivision, proposed subdivision to get out.
So I guess I've got one question with it. What's, you know, we have this street easement that's in question of where it exists, what it doesn't. What if Darren says, I'm gonna grant the entire right of way on my property? How can we stop the street from being constructed at that point? Not that he's going to do that, I mean, land is worth money, but
Yeah.
if there's an offset in the street and the entire right of way is on his property, not the adjacent's, he has the right to develop to that if he chooses, correct?
Yeah, he just, I think the way the ordinance is structured forgoes the opportunity to get the property owner on the west to pay for that straight manana.
I'm just asking because I've dealt with that in our developments. I can just give the right of way and pay for it ourselves.
How are you planning on running that sewer, Darren, from Fairgrounds up? Are you planning on, it shows it over on the properties on,
It's gonna go in the right of way.
in the right of way?
We don't show right of way there.
No,
Or
there's
utility-
right away.
Right of way, there's no utility.
There's no utility.
But
It'd have to be in the street right away, not on the back into those lots.
Exactly.
But that shows it going across their yards and then like through a shed.
Well, that would be something that would have to be amended before the plat. Probably need to be built with another manhole.
you probably have to go straight over and then up. We got a water main, 8-inch water main that runs right up there, at least to the center of Green Gables. It's gonna have to be crossed and stuff. There are a couple other things, if we move forward, going with everything. On like some of the utilities, all workable stuff that we've done, we like to flip-flop the sewer up to the front of the streets. Because if we have the turnaround here, we can't reach from the south end all the way to north with the sewer machine to clean something if we had to. And there won't be any access over on those corners. So we just flip that up at the front, which shouldn't be a problem. Put the electric in the back and clear it up for all utilities.
Any other? Do you have a question?
Nope. I'm just pointing out a few things that were brought to my attention.
So any other questions for Darren or anybody else? Or concerns? All right. So that's gonna bring us
I still
to,
say just be for the primary cul-de-sac at the end of it and not connect down, that would help it a lot.
make your recommendation. Consideration.
Yeah, it could be,
Could be.
if that's what the commission wants to do.
We want to vote, we want to move this forward to vote on whether or not we approve based on a list of recommendations and we know what that list of recommendations from.
street, the half street, it has to be a full street, and we need the easements right away from the landowner.
So I'd say we're gonna table this for tonight, right now, we're gonna come back to it this evening. But I would move to vacate. Come back to this. Does that make sense?
Yes. All right, we are gonna hold right now, table this until later in the meeting.
We're not following this.
And we're gonna move on
The
to
city can't vote this down.
the
They
vacation
can.
of North Hickman Street.
There's usually problems.
There was a letter or a request, that's one, thank you very much, a request to have the city vacate the North Hickman Street area. And
So, Sydney? Can you weigh in on the request to vacate Hickman Street, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had sent Heather, basically the legal parameters to look at vacation and the points for, you know, the planning and zoning committee to consider for vacation. Did the planning and zoning commission receive that? Do you all have those points of discussion?
Yes, they did.
So I would say that those are kind of the guiding points. The one that I think that sticks out in my mind, in addition to the court cases that have talked about vacation when there hasn't been on the face like a ton of public use of a road, is the minimal amount of maintenance that is required, that the maintenance not be continuous, and that there have been no anticipated public use for that particular road. And the court left that pretty open-ended. I, on the face of it, do not believe legally that the Planning and Zoning Commission actually has a legal basis to grant this vacation based on the points articulated by the court cases and by the 4 points required for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider a vacation request.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
do we wanna make a motion on this?
Do we need to, or since she said we cannot?
I would go ahead and make it clear in the record, that the vacation was actually struck down because if the Planning and Zoning Commission does not take some form of formal action after being considered, it possibly could be considered approved by lack of action. So I would prefer the record be clear, even though I do not find that there is a legal basis for the vacation, Planning and Zoning Commission should still make a final determination.
So to make sure we have the wording correctly here on the motion, it's been brought forth as a request for vacation. So in the motion, I'm gonna ask for a motion of approval, and if we deny that or approve that, I'm sure that you understand this is an emotion, the motion right now is based on it. And a motion to approve, a motion to approve. We just need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second on the motion to approve? We're gonna vote, so. We've got to get it.
I'll make the second.
All those in favor of accepting the vacation of the land at North Hick, or of the north part of Hickman? Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. So let it stand that it has been denied on the vacation of North Hickman. addressed before the final plat, or the preliminary plat is put in, right? So as long as we have a clear list of what those would be, to be addressed. So right now, what we have, and I'll say, for as far as the list that's been going on this side of the table, is that we have to have the names on the adjacent landowners. We cannot have the half street, right? That has to be addressed, because we cannot accept a new half street. We have the issue with the clarification of the sewer, right, as it comes in, because it's currently shown running through exactly in a shed, so we need to have that corrected to where it's actually gonna be. We have the, recommendation on the turnaround. I don't know how we wanna address that, but that would alleviate the concerns of the citizens on some of the traffic flow. What else do we have?
That's what I wrote down. So for that easement.
The 20-foot storm sewer easement from the north end of Amberwood to the detention basin. Designated right away from the adjacent landowners for Hickman Street.
No more than 800 feet for the cul-de-sac, from the stem to, from the right of way to the center of the cul-de-sac.
So the existing cul-de-sac that's in there on the turnaround, you're talking about the 800 feet
Right.
requirement?
What's the clarification on it, because that's for a permanent one.
Right.
No, that's not, it doesn't specify whether it's
It
permanent or
says-
It
temporary.
says, it
Says
says
right here,
permanently
remember-
designated dead end or cul-de-sac streets.
So you're gonna allow it for a temporary one, that's kind of, that's reaching. That'll be there for a long time.
Sydney, do you have an opinion on that?
I mean, an allowance of a temporary turnaround for construction purposes, is that the question? I can sort of hear Don, but I can't hear him completely.
No,
Well, the question, yes, because, not necessarily allowing it, but because it is over 800 feet to the cul-de-sac.
I guess I'm still confused, right? Right now, it's just put in there as a temporary, correct? Meaning it's used for construction, correct?
it's a turnaround until the further development, so it may be 3 years, it might be 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, temporary means temporary. It would be okay for construction purposes if while they're building the phase out that currently has been presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, I would have a little bit of heartburn from it being temporary beyond that.
Okay. So we would need to designate that it needed to be, to meet that requirement.
We could address that by losing the two lots within one corner. Just move that two lots, pick them up on the second.
So we'll add that to the list, then the 800 foot. 800 feet on the turnaround. And then we have the Hickman Street construction. And that's, because we already have it from, 22 to Fairgrounds. You're talking Fairgrounds to the entrance of his
Yes.
subdivision. Are there any items that we've missed, that we've discussed? All right, so just for the sake of making sure that we're clear on what these items were, adding names of adjacent landowners, designated right-of-way from adjacent landowners for Hickman Street. No half-streets are allowed by city code, so we need to provide a full street with 60-foot, is that row? Right-of-way, row.
It is.
I say row.
I asked that question this morning.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Include a 20-foot easement for the storm sewer from the north end of Amberwood Drive with detention basin for section 30.1-21 D1. Hickman Street construction from fairground to subdivision entrance, we took that address, and then no more than 800 feet for the length of the cul-de-sac turnaround.
Temporary cul-de-sac on.
And a temporary cul-de-sac, we still didn't put that on there, we're really pushing to get that.
Okay,
So,
so
we're gonna
temporary.
ask them to look at a temporary cul-de-sac, turn for that,
For Allen Street.
Allen Street, thank you.
To prevent Allen Street from being connected.
Yes.
Which would address the traffic flow concerns by the citizens of the area.
So you're talking about two different cul-de-sac conditions?
Yes.
The first is for the one that's on the existing, sketch plat, which is currently not meeting the 800 feet for the code. The second one is a recommendation from, committee member on putting in a cul-de-sac over for Allen Street rather than connecting it, which would provide some relief to the citizens of the area on traffic flow concerns. So we're asking the developer to look at that.
We do have a well off the end of Allen Street back there that, and a pallet around it, the pipe sticking up, it's gonna have to be abandoned, sealed off. That would require a permit from DNR.
May I ask a question? Is it appropriate? On the Allen Street, if that were not connected to the subdivision, that would meet city's requirements. I mean, we have a stub street to our property, and just, if we temporary cul-de-sac it or cul-de-sac it and don't connect it so the traffic doesn't go that way and it all goes down Hickman, is that, does that meet city requirements for interconnectivity of the streets?
And fire code?
I just want to make sure that that last condition isn't causing me another problem with the code.
From the street department side, connectivity would be better. Another fire department would like that too, probably.
My opinion, interconnectivity is always better.
Yeah, still the same thing.
It's stepped out for a road, not for a cul-de-sac.
Susan, can I ask one more question? Is there any way that we can make all construction go through the Hickman entrance rather than coming up Allen Street and tearing up Allen Street?
It won't make it, it won't last.
I would almost say they're gonna need to be updated before
Yeah, you
bringing
can
a bunch of
direct further
construction vehicles
construction
down too.
to alleviate damage and or other conditions to other city assets. So at Hickman Street is where you guys would like to direct traffic for construction. You can't designate that such.
Okay.
Let's tear it up. That road company.
So is he going to have to build Hickman all the way down to Fairgrounds? As Lynn suggested?
We have it in there as a,
Hasn't been determined.
as a, you
It's
know,
gotta be
as a
built.
point to be discussed and recommended, but
Because that street won't stand up for construction traffic.
No, it'll have to be, that road will have to be built. Now,
Question
how it
becomes,
gets built up, the question
is who pays for it? And does the city pay for it or does?
No, comprehensive plan.
so it's, we have,
part of the city's responsibility, the way I understand it, is to aid development, so we'll just have to figure out what that looks like. I mean, it's something to be discussed, it can't be decided out of tonight, I mean, in fairness. You know, I'm not gonna say something that we
Right.
back ourselves in a corner, because, you know, it's a development, and the consideration we give to any development.
No, it wasn't. Boyd had to put in a full 60-foot street down there.
No, let's, yeah. So we have added on here that the construction traffic shall go down Hickman Street and avoid Allen Street.
I just have a question. I'm sorry. So when is he allowed to start bringing construction vehicles down?
Well, this is-
Before it's updated or after? Because right now, as the road, as it stands, I don't think it's going to hold up to construction vehicles. So is there a date when that?
There's no contingency on, unless the,
Cindy, the question is, when we say that Hickman has to be used for construction vehicles, and we're asking, for Hickman Street from Fairgrounds to the beginning of the subdivision to be, improved, when can we set a time frame for when those vehicles start going down Hickman Street? Because there's a concern that Hickman Street will not, sustain the weight of the construction vehicles going up and down it for development.
So, I mean, at this point, where the Planning and Zoning Commission is approving the sketch plat with conditions regarding the plat on the use of the road for construction, that's gonna come up later during what I would call a construction development agreement. So, we're not quite there yet. It's good to give the developer a heads up of what the city is thinking, but that would be at the next phase where we would have a construction development agreement. And generally at that point, there is an agreement that is entered into between the city and the developer on, usually a bond that is deposited in a certain amount to repay the city for the cost of reconstructing the road. So he would have to deposit a construction bond at that point, or a bond for the road. We're not quite there yet, so that would be the next step. But at least now he's on notice that Hickman would be the point, and if the staff has any concerns to articulate about its concerns about the possible wear and tear to Hickman, go ahead and put that in at this point, but during the preliminary plat approval and the final plat, we can discuss the actual reimbursement for the repair at Hickman.
okay.
No, it's fine.
My handwriting's terrible, so I kept messing back here. Okay, so I put that down here as just addressing the concerns. I know it comes up a later date, but we've noted that there is concerns about the wearing, further deterioration of Hickman due to construction traffic. Darren's here, he hears the concerns. We've got it noted over here, so, I think we've got that covered. So as it pertains to the North Point subdivision, I'm standing at the point right now where I think we've captured all of the concerns and the recommendations. We've heard from the public, their concerns. We've heard from the developer on their side. Is there any further questions or concerns from the Planning and Zoning Committee?
We're back here at reading on the cul-de-sac, why not split that off?
Oh, we're gonna
Just, you just want to
take that one back out.
Yeah, it's just a step, get better emergency vehicle access, and other sewer equipment access.
So what happens if they don't use, if they start using Allen Street as construction and start tearing it up? Because them concrete drivers, they get in that truck, they turn it.
If they violate it, and if they start driving construction of Allen Street, we'll have to file an injunction against them and sue them. And that would stop the entire, movement forward of the subdivision
the ability to make sure that there's not heavy equipment driving down through there at a certain point across.
In the past, we've addressed this issue by putting just some Jersey barriers or blocks across the road there with the barricade signs that road closed, knowing that once construction is complete and maybe 70% of the homes are complete, then that could be opened up by just removing that barricade. That would be a way to address that we've done in the past.
But that's at the front of that subdivision, right? That would be at Green Gables, right?
No, it'd be on.
At 22 and Allen?
The stub of
It'd be the
Allen.
back.
Right there.
Outside, so they can't get through.
So where we're building to our south property line, it would be on our property there. And so it wouldn't interfere with the Green Gables, but it would prevent traffic from, any traffic from coming down Allen until at such point that you guys deem that this construction is complete enough that you can open up the street without fear. And that, I would recommend that to Darren, just because you can't, as the gentleman said, you can't control everybody in their pickups and their trucks doing what they're gonna do. So if you got physically barricaded, that would protect Darren from
But
someone
you're
else
talking,
violating.
but that means that you're gonna barricade off North Allen from 22 up, that's what we were talking about.
Back end of, back.
No, we're talking about what's gonna happen on North Allen from 22 to Green Gables.
But if they have it barricaded, nobody can get into the subdivision. So
Well,
they
that's
have
what
to
I'm
go
saying, but if that's what that's the way that I understand
That's
him
what
saying.
if they pull down there, they
No,
can't
because
get
you
in, then they
can't-
gotta turn
no.
around and go back out.
You can't make
That's-
these concrete truck drivers not turn onto Allen Street and go that way. They're gonna tear up Allen Street anyway.
All right,
I think they can
so,
get there.
okay.
Let turn it back.
I think we've taken it as a point that we're going to tell the developer, we're gonna recommend the developer and ask them, or not ask them, but instruct them to have all construction traffic go down Hickman Street. Now, whether you can control every concrete truck driver, everybody else, everybody knows you cannot do that. We do have,
We have public service.
exactly, tools at our disposal to address that issue, and I'm sure that.
We're talking about for development, right?
Right,
We're not
so
talking
we're not
about
there
building
yet,
houses or
and-
anything like that. Or are we trying to say building houses, everything?
Construction, I mean, building a house is construction.
Okay. I'm just trying to
Yeah, I
clarify.
mean, building a
But I
house
think
would be
it's pretty
construction,
open-ended.
to me.
Trying to keep the heavy traffic from going, and the heavy weighted trucks and everything else from going down Allen Street for construction purposes is the concern. And we can direct that to Hickman, and we have tools and resources at our disposal if that is violated, but it can't, we're not to the point of that at this time, I don't believe. I think at this point, all we can do is say this is the intent. So. All right. Anything else? It's not ready to bring this thing to motion. Or to a gavel, one or the other. All right. On the North Point subdivision sketch plat, with the recommendations that are listed over here. We need a motion on the approval of the sketch plat.
I'll make that motion along with recommendations.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the North Point subdivision with the recommendations as listed?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right.
Thank you all for your time and consideration.
This brings us to the, I believe we're at, as may rise.
I have another question, if you will. What is vacation of North Hickman Street, just what does that mean?
The vacation of North Hickman Street is a request by the existing property owners for the city of Centralia to vacate ownership of the North Hickman Street.
If they say they don't own,
You
don't take care of it.
That was what we denied earlier.
Yeah, and I know, but I'm just curious on what it actually means.
It means that we vacate any right of way to it, and then once you vacate it, it goes back to the original property owners. It's split to whoever originally gave that right of
There
way.
was some, that's why I asked her early on, there was some legal, there's some real legal interpretation need to be involved in that, right? So that's why I asked her.
Are you on Port Hickman Street?
Okay, so we are now to the, as may arise, we need to
We do need to set a new meeting date. There's a consideration for the Barella subdivision. This was considered in 2005 back in Armenia County. They said it was never fully approved, so we need to go back through the process to officially approve the subdivision. So if you have a few dates,
Where's that located?
it's off of Wigan Street.
This is how it is so far. Do we
Bill.
have- not public
It's
hearing.
built, it
There,
is.
just got
Yeah, it's probably over here at the corner. It's a-
Oh, 'cause that's
Jefferson,
a-
yeah, it's a Jefferson. Yeah, but it has, it already has a cul-de-sac on it. You can't see it. It's a Jefferson and Wigan. Infrastructure's already there.
Not well up on the streets.
So, we need about 2 weeks out. I do have to get notice to the bar, 5 days in advance. Earliest I'd be able to get it in, probably, I can try to get it in for the 21st, or sorry, the 14th. Not sure if it'll make it in. But I'll definitely try, they usually try to get, they're usually very good to work with at the bar.
So they could put it in there and then we would
I need to
have,
have 5 days. So really, if you just do 2 weeks,
we'll do the first week of August.
the last week of July.
I'm not available last week of July.
Okay, first week of August then.
You all have a good one.
First week of August.
First week in August, does that work for you? For you? Brian's the only one that doesn't work for. I think Brian's the only one that doesn't work for the first week of
Yeah,
August.
I think I'm gonna now.
Okay. We'll go first week of August then.
Huh? I cannot do the first.
I can do any night, so.
Sure, be here a second.
Just the third,
Third's fine.
third is it, or is the second better? What's better for you?
Also fine.
7 or 30 is
State
fine.
okay, concerning the plot.
I will look everything else around it. But I have to have a lunch and
Worst thing, probably no rat, but I'll make bitch.
But Tuesday gives us time to wake up.
Okay. Tuesday, August 3rd.
Okay, anything, do we
Tuesday,
have,
August 3rd. August 3rd at 6.
send us an email or something?
I will.
Okay, great, yeah, that'd be great.
6 o'clock, or do you want 6:30? What's better?
6:30.
6:30.
Okay.
all right. Anything else, any other new, anything else on Esme or I's?
Say 6:30.
6:30.
6:30, August 3rd.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Opposed? Okay.